Germany, spring 1945. The war was ending, but no one had told the rubble. A 7-year-old boy crouched in the remains of a kitchen, fingers wrapped around a rusted can, hollow-eyed and silent. Then boots appeared, American boots. The child looked up, trembling, expecting the monster his teachers had promised. Instead, the soldier knelt in the dust, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a harmonica. What happened next would echo through decades, captured in letters, photographs, and the quiet transformation of a man who carried guilt across an ocean and found redemption in the smallest gesture. Private James Sullivan grew up in Kentucky coal country, where music was cheaper than food and twice as necessary. His father had worked the mines until black lung took him at 43. His mother raised 5 children in a 2-room house, where the only decoration was a faded photograph of Christ and a harmonica that hung on a nail by the door. James learned to play at 6. His older brother taught him, guiding small fingers across the metal reeds until sound became melody. By 12, James could play anything: hymns for Sunday service, folk songs for Saturday nights, blues for the empty hours when the mountain pressed down like a fist. The harmonica went everywhere, to school in his shirt pocket, to the creek where he fished, to the general store where old men gathered on the porch, spitting tobacco and sharing stories. When James played, people stopped talking. The instrument sang in his hands, notes rising pure and clean, carrying something that words could not touch. In 1943, at 19, James received his draft notice. His mother cried silently at the kitchen table while he packed a canvas bag with 2 shirts, a pair of socks, and the harmonica. She pressed her hand against his cheek. "Music makes people remember they're human," she whispered. "Don't forget that." He kissed her forehead and walked to the bus station. Fort Benning, Georgia. Heat like liquid metal. Drill sergeants shouting commands that turned boys into soldiers, or tried to. James kept the harmonica hidden during the day, but at night, when the barracks settled into exhausted silence, he would sometimes play softly. Just a few notes, enough to remember Kentucky, enough to keep something alive that the Army worked hard to erase. Other soldiers noticed. A private from Boston asked him to play Danny Boy. A farmhand from Iowa requested Red River Valley. James obliged, and the music created brief pockets of peace in the machinery of war. They shipped out in January 1944. The Atlantic crossing took 2 weeks. Men vomited over railings. Others prayed. James played his harmonica on deck, facing the endless gray water, wondering if he would ever see Kentucky again. England first, then France after D-Day, following the front as it pushed east. James saw things that reshaped the architecture of his mind: bodies in ditches, villages reduced to skeletal walls, children staring from shattered windows with eyes that had witnessed the collapse of the world. He stopped playing the harmonica. By April 1945, the German regime's forces were collapsing. James's unit pushed across the Rhine, moving through towns where white flags hung from windows like surrender made visible. The landscape bore witness to total war-burnt tanks, cratered roads, forests stripped bare by artillery. They entered a small town called Lineberg on April 18th. The place was nearly empty. Most civilians had fled west, away from the approaching forces from the east. Those who remained were mostly elderly, injured, or children whose parents had vanished into the chaos. The battalion commander established headquarters in what had been the town hall. Soldiers fanned out to clear buildings, search for regime holdouts, secure supplies. James's squad was assigned to patrol the residential district, a collection of stone houses with red tile roofs, many now missing sections of wall. That's when James heard the sound. A child crying. Not the sharp wail of pain, but the low, continuous sob of someone who had been crying for so long it became background noise to their own existence. James followed the sound to a partially collapsed house at the end of a narrow street. The front door hung loose on one hinge. Inside, furniture lay overturned. Dust hung thick in the air, visible in shafts of light that penetrated holes in the roof. The crying came from what had been a kitchen. He was 7 years old, blonde hair matted with dirt, face smudged with ash and tears. He wore short pants and a shirt several sizes too large, probably his father's, and shoes wrapped with string to hold them together. His arms were wrapped around his knees, body curled tight, rocking slightly. On the floor beside him, an empty tin can and a cracked photograph of a woman holding a baby. James stood in the doorway. The boy looked up. Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither moved. The child's face showed pure terror, muscles tight, breath coming in rapid gasps, body tensing to run or fight or disappear. Everything in his expression suggested he expected violence. His teachers had told him about American soldiers. The propaganda posters had shown them as monsters. The radio broadcasts had described their cruelty. James saw all of this in the boy's eyes. He saw the propaganda dissolving against reality. He saw a child who had lost everything and was waiting for the final blow. Slowly, James knelt. He set his rifle against the wall, far enough away that it couldn't be reached quickly. He held up both hands, palms open. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, it's okay." The boy didn't understand English, but tone carries meaning beyond language. James kept his voice low, steady, the way he would approach a frightened animal. The child's sobbing slowed. His eyes tracked every movement, but the raw terror began to ease slightly, replaced by confusion. This wasn't the monster. This was a young man with dirt on his face and exhaustion in his posture, kneeling in rubble, offering empty hands. James reached slowly into his pocket. The boy flinched. James paused, then continued even more carefully, pulling out the harmonica. The instrument caught the light. Silver with a worn wooden frame. James's fingerprints visible on the metal. The boy stared at it. James raised the harmonica to his lips and played 3 notes. Simple, clear, a fragment of a lullaby his mother had sung when he was small. The effect was immediate. The boy's eyes widened. The crying stopped entirely. He tilted his head, listening with the absolute concentration of childhood, when wonder can still break through trauma. James played more. Not a full song, just phrases, gentle and slow. The notes filled the destroyed kitchen, softening the edges of the broken world. The boy uncurled slightly. His breathing steadied. James lowered the harmonica and held it out, offering it across the small distance between them. The child stared. His gaze moved from the instrument to James's face and back again. Confusion warred with desire. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for an enemy soldier offering a gift. "Go ahead," James said, nodding toward the harmonica. "It's yours." The boy didn't move. So James set the harmonica on the floor between them and slowly stood, backing toward the door. He gave the child space, room to choose without pressure. For a long moment, the boy just stared at the harmonica lying on the dusty floor, silver and wood against gray stone. Then, tentatively, he reached out. His small fingers touched the metal, warm from James's hands. Real. He picked it up, held it close to his chest, like something precious that might disappear. Then the boy did something that would haunt James for the rest of his life. He smiled. Not a large smile, not joyful, but genuine. A small crack in the armor of survival, a momentary return to childhood. The boy raised the harmonica to his lips and blew. The note came out sharp, discordant, but to him it was magic. He blew again and again, creating sound, making something in a world that had only taken away. James watched from the doorway. Something inside him, something that had been frozen since England, began to thaw. Tears pressed hot against his eyes. He blinked them back. "You keep that," James said, though the boy couldn't understand. "You keep playing." He turned and walked out into the broken street. James didn't tell anyone about the boy at first. The unit moved through Lineberg, securing the area, processing civilians, establishing basic order. But James kept returning to that street, checking on the child from a distance. The boy was an orphan. His mother had died during an air raid in February. His father had been taken for forced labor and never returned. The child had been surviving in that house for 3 weeks, eating whatever he could scavenge: spoiled potatoes, raw grain, water from puddles. A local woman, Frau Weber, had been trying to care for several orphan children in her basement. She was 70, exhausted, overwhelmed. When James found her, she was dividing 1 loaf of bread among 6 children. James brought rations: chocolate bars, crackers, canned meat, things the army had in surplus now that supply lines were functioning. He did this quietly, not for recognition, but because he couldn't unsee those children's faces. The boy with the harmonica, his name was Klaus, stayed close to Frau Weber, but watched for James. Whenever the soldier appeared, Klaus would pull out the harmonica and play. The notes were getting better. Someone had shown him how to hold it properly. The random noise became deliberate sound, then the beginnings of melody. Other soldiers noticed. Corporal Davis asked James why he was spending so much time in the refugee district. "Just checking on things," James said. "That kid with the harmonica," Davis observed. "He yours? What? I mean, did you give that to him?" James hesitated, then nodded. Davis was quiet for a moment, watching Klaus attempt to play while sitting on rubble. "That's good," Davis finally said. "That's real good, Sullivan. We need more of that." James's unit moved out of Lineberg on May 3rd. The war was days from ending. German forces were surrendering en masse. The machinery of the regime was collapsing. Before leaving, James visited Frau Weber's basement one last time. Klaus was there, the harmonica hanging around his neck on a piece of string. When he saw James, the boy ran forward and threw his arms around the soldier's legs. James knelt and held the child. Klaus's body was so thin, bones sharp against James's hands. The boy said something in German, rapid and urgent. Frau Weber translated, her English broken but clear enough. "He says thank you. He says you are not like they told him. He says the music helped him remember his mother." James felt his throat constrict. He nodded, unable to speak. He touched the harmonica, hanging around Klaus's neck. "You keep playing," James managed, "every day. Promise me." Klaus nodded seriously, even though he couldn't understand the words. Children know sincerity when they see it. James stood and turned to Frau Weber. "Will he be okay?" She looked tired beyond measure. "We will try. There are many children. The town must rebuild. We will do what we can." James pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. He wrote his mother's address in Kentucky, pressed it into Frau Weber's hand. "If anything happens, if he needs anything, write to this address, please." She took the paper, folded it carefully, and placed it in her apron pocket. "I will remember," she said. James walked out of the basement and rejoined his unit. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen Klaus standing in the doorway, holding the harmonica, watching the soldier disappear into the chaos of war's ending. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. James spent the summer in occupied Germany, part of the force maintaining order and processing the aftermath. He was shipped home in October. Kentucky looked exactly the same and completely different. The mountains were unchanged, but James had transformed. He moved through his mother's house like a ghost, present but not entirely there. His brothers and sisters asked about the war. He gave short answers. What could he tell them? How do you describe watching the world tear itself apart? The harmonica's absence felt like an amputated limb. His hand would reach for his pocket and find nothing. At night, he dreamed of playing in the barracks, on the ship, in destroyed houses. He dreamed of Klaus. In January 1946, A letter arrived from Germany. Frau Weber's handwriting was careful, precise. Dear Mr. Sullivan, I write to tell you about Klaus. He is well. The town is rebuilding. We have food now. The occupation authorities have established schools. Klaus attends every day. He keeps your harmonica always. He has learned to play very well. The teacher says he has talent. Klaus asks me to tell you something. He says the harmonica taught him that not all soldiers are the same, that music is the same everywhere, that kindness can exist even in war. He wants you to know he remembers you. He practices every day, as you told him to do. We are grateful. You gave a child hope when he had none. With respect, Frau Anna Weber James read the letter 3 times. Then he sat at his mother's kitchen table and cried. His mother held him while he shook, releasing years of held grief. James married in 1948, worked in a factory, had 2 children, lived a quiet life in the same town where he grew up. He bought a new harmonica, but rarely played it. The instrument stayed in a drawer, wrapped in cloth. His wife noticed. "Why don't you play any more?" she asked. "I gave my music away," James said, "to someone who needed it more." He told her about Klaus, about the destroyed kitchen and a terrified child, and the moment when a simple gesture became something larger than itself. Letters came from Germany every year. Frau Weber wrote until she died in 1952. Then Klaus himself wrote, first in halting English, then with increasing fluency. He described his life finishing school, learning carpentry, meeting a girl. Every letter mentioned the harmonica. It had become a talisman, a reminder of the day the world began to make sense again. In 1962, Klaus wrote that he had a son. He named him James. James Sullivan sat in his Kentucky kitchen, holding that letter, feeling the weight of connection across oceans and years. He pulled the harmonica from its drawer and played, for the first time in a decade. The notes came easily, muscle memory preserved. His children stopped playing and listened. His wife came to the doorway. "That's beautiful," she said. "It's for Klaus," James replied. "Wherever he is." They met in 1985. Klaus came to America on business. He had become a furniture maker, his company expanding internationally. He brought his wife and his son, young James, now 23. The reunion took place at James Sullivan's house. Both men were older, now James at 61, Klaus at 47. But when Klaus stepped out of the car, the harmonica hung around his neck on a silver chain. They stood in the driveway, looking at each other. 40 years dissolved. The destroyed kitchen in Lineburg overlaid the peaceful Kentucky street. Klaus walked forward and embraced James. Neither man spoke. Words were inadequate. Inside, Klaus told the full story to James's family. How the harmonica had saved him. How it taught him that the enemy was also human. How he had built his life on the foundation of that single act of unexpected kindness. "I was 7, Klaus said, his English now perfect, but still carrying an accent. "I had lost everything. I believed the world was only cruelty. Then an American soldier knelt in the rubble and gave me music. Do you understand? He gave me the thing he loved most. I saw it in his face. The harmonica meant everything to him, and he gave it to a child he would never see again." Klaus reached for the chain around his neck. "I have kept it close for 40 years. It has traveled with me everywhere. When my father never returned, when Frau Weber died, when I struggled to rebuild my life, I would play this harmonica and remember that kindness exists, that humans can choose compassion even when the world demands violence." He removed the chain and held out the harmonica. "I came to return it." James stared at the instrument. The metal was more worn now, the wooden frame darkened with age and handling, but it was the same harmonica his brother had taught him to play in a Kentucky hollow decades ago. "Klaus," James said, his voice thick, "that's yours." "I gave it to you." "Yes," Klaus agreed. "But I want you to understand what you gave me. Not just an instrument, not just a moment of comfort. You gave me proof that I could survive, that the world was not only darkness, that music beauty, kindness, humanity could exist even in war's worst moments." James took the harmonica, held it, then handed it back. "Keep it," he said, "please. It found the person who needed it most." That was always the point. Klaus's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, returned the chain to his neck. That evening, they played together. Klaus on the original harmonica, James on his newer one. They played Kentucky folk songs and German hymns, taking turns teaching each other melodies from their separate worlds. The music filled the house. Two voices joined in harmony, testament to the connection forged in rubble 40 years before. The meaning, the story spread quietly. Klaus told it in interviews when his company became successful. James shared it with reporters when local historians documented veterans' experiences. The harmonica itself was eventually donated to a museum in Washington, where it sits in a case labeled Instruments of Peace. But the real legacy lived in the lives it touched. Klaus's son, James, became a music teacher, working with refugee children in Berlin. He used his father's story as a teaching tool, how music transcends borders, how kindness can break through propaganda, how a single moment of humanity can echo through generations. James Sullivan died in 1993 at 69. Klaus came to the funeral, the harmonica still around his neck. He played at the graveside, Amazing Grace, in a German cemetery in Kentucky, the notes carrying across the mountains, a final thank you from a boy who had been saved by music. The American soldier and the German boy, the gift and the gesture. What does it mean? Military historians note it as a small example of post-combat humanization, the moment when soldiers encounter civilians and remember their own humanity. Psychologists point to it as evidence of trauma healing through connection. Musicians see it as proof that art transcends conflict. But perhaps the simplest truth is this. In the spring of 1945, in a destroyed town in Germany, a young soldier made a choice. He could have walked past the crying child. He could have followed protocol and reported the orphan to proper authorities. He could have hardened his heart against the suffering he saw everywhere. Instead, he knelt in rubble and offered the thing he valued most, not because it would change the war, not because it would earn recognition, but because a child was crying and he had something that might help. The harmonica didn't rebuild Lineberg. It didn't bring back Klaus's parents. It didn't undo the years of regime propaganda or the trauma of war. But it did something else. It created a moment where two human beings connected across the vast divide of conflict, where an enemy became a person, where fear transformed into trust. Klaus carried that moment for 40 years. He built his life on the foundation of that kindness. He taught his children the lesson of the harmonica, that we choose every day whether to pass by suffering or to kneel in the rubble and offer what we have. Music makes people remember they're human. James Sullivan's mother had told him that, and he proved it true in a destroyed kitchen in Germany, in a gesture so simple it might have been forgotten if not for the life it changed. The harmonica played on, through Klaus's fingers, through his son's teaching, through the story told and retold, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, small acts of unexpected grace can echo through generations, changing not the world perhaps, but one world at a time. And sometimes that is enough.